Good evening, welcome to the Fourth Estate. My name is Alan Kasuja, and I'd like to introduce you to my panel. Chris Obore, investigations editor at the Daily Monitor, is on my immediate left. I hear he's now called Majoroto. What does that mean? Why would Frank call you Majoroto?
Ignore that excited NRM man.
No, Majoroto.
Okay, and then of course, I've got Betty Amongi, Member of Parliament, and Honorable Amongi represents Oyam District. Thank you. Welcome to the show.
Not Oyam District, Oyam County South.
Oyam County South.
Yes.
Thank you very much for the correction. And then we've also got Mr. Frank Tumwebaze, who is the Member of Parliament for Chibale County and a farmer as well. Which one is more important, farming or being Member of Parliament?
Both. Farming is more important because when I'm broke and I need to do a few things to move in the constituency, I sell my cows.
Okay,
and then I move around.
Oh, you demand a new kind of parliament.
Leave Majoroto alone. I will
Of
tell you what
course,
it
Angelo
means.
Izama. Angelo Izama is a political analyst as well as a writer, and he's also the executive director of Fanaka kwa Water, which is an organization that does very many things, keeps an eye on things, and keeps their hand on the pulse as far as the trends in this region are concerned. Welcome to the Fourth Estate, gentlemen and lady.
Thank you, Alan.
Let's look at some of the stories that made headlines this week. Let's kick off, of course, by this poll that we shall be delving a little bit into in a few moments, which says that Museveni should retire in 2016, according to the Daily Monitor, that was run on Wednesday, the 23rd. I'm sure that you'd be happy if he retired, Frank.
I have no problem. I would be happy, yes. But I would be happy as well to enable him to do what Ugandans want him to do.
Is that because you're a direct beneficiary of his presence?
Oh, that's a big debate. Ugandans have benefited from the services of a man called President Museveni, and they can best tell you how. That's why they keep voting for him all the time at the chaguing of so many forces.
Okay, and Betty,
yes.
I'm sure you agree with
But I thought that was
Ugandans.
the poll, so it shouldn't be a question that is framed from there.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So Betty, you say you agree with Frank. Ugandans have benefited, I'm sure.
No, I don't agree with Frank. First of all, I think the polls represents the current views of many Ugandans. As you are aware, this year has been, last year and this year has been one of those that has seen the biggest chunk of discontent over the last 25 years on Museveni's regime.
Is that necessarily true, Angelo?
I think so. I would, in fact, say that if you take the entire post-independence history of Uganda and you eliminate the wars, civil wars, that this has been the biggest slump in public confidence.
Okay.
So there are many uncertainties that have come into play because of the economic crisis.
Okay, fair enough. Now,
What are the...
Angelo, I mean, Chris Obore, Chris Abesiji, according to the same poll, 45% of the respondents want him to contest for presidency again in 2016. I'm sure you'll continue voting for
I think
him.
the poll said if President Museveni does not stand, whom would the people vote? That's why basically comes out top. And the same poll says,
Do you believe that Besige is actually an alternative to President Museveni?
if President Museveni is not standing, there is no other person in Uganda other than Besigye who will win elections.
Is that true?
You see, to take it from what he said, and actually also to question the research. You see, the research is very much aware, and I will say that deliberately because I know the people who did the research. And
Who are the people who did?
And I will tell them. They are simply saying that for you to enable Besigye to be parachuted to the top, make sure you create a perception that Museveni is away. Because the authors of that research are FDC agents, and they are well known.
And
They are well known. And,
How is
and one of the ethical considerations of a professional research, ethical consideration, is that bias should be controlled, if not eliminated.
would
to
that
the
be your
maximum.
argument if it was favorable, completely favorable to the NRM? Would you still maintain that same
Even
stance?
if it
For
was,
example, Afrobarometer
even
not
if
too
it
long
was
ago.
favorable, like it is actually in some aspects,
Right.
it does not stop me or stop Betty or Bore to question the principles that guided the research. Point number one, the researcher should be completely out of a situation of conflict of interest. You cannot tell me the researcher who was a former FDC candidate in Ikiki will not do anything possible to show Besigye as the best alternative. So that's point number one that makes me doubt the research. Secondly, the research says Museveni, everybody says should go, but they say NRM is still popular and can win an election. These are the same views and commentaries we have always had as NRM.
NRM is not Museveni, is it?
Let me make an argument.
Okay.
The same commentaries from the political elite and those who oppose the NRM have always said there is no NRM without Museveni.
Right.
Now, if Museveni is the chairman of the NRM, he spearheads its policies, he runs its manifesto, then what parameter was measured in the research to divorce him, to project the party as popular and the individual as unpopular?
He makes a very fair point, Chris. You have to agree. People like you keep saying that NRM would not exist without Museveni. But he makes a very valid point.
Actually, I have issues with that finding of the research as well. That the people in NRM want Museveni to retire. It is far from it. What I can see, what could have influenced the
What
research.
is the research that you've done that contradicts this?
what could
Because
have,
it can't be speculated.
what could have influenced the research is the internal squabbling in NRM now.
Let me put it to you differently, Chris. You're basically saying you don't agree with this research. You've not conducted anything scientific to cause you to arrive at a conclusion that is different from this one.
You see, if we bestow everything to scientific, to individuals, that's what he's saying. There is no individual who is not prone to error. And the reason we are discussing it here is to highlight what we think could not have been done well. I am not rubbishing the report. What I'm saying, that arriving at that NRM people want Museveni to retire, and another candidate of NRM stands, could have been influenced by what we are seeing today in the media, the alleged fights within NRM. There is Kadaga, there is Tafire, there is Babazi. So perhaps people will think these fights are there to succeed in 2016. So if Museveni is away, they could still vote an NRM candidate. But the point is, Museveni will be around 2016, and none of all of these people you see being talked today can manage to stand.
None of these people, so you're basically saying the Babazis, the Kadakas.
None of them.
Do you agree with that notion
I can tell you,
none of them will stand?
Let me conclude.
Yeah.
Because if you ask Kadaga today, that who's the movement chairperson in the Kaboro, she will not tell you.
She doesn't know?
The popularity is because she's in the parliament.
Right.
And it's because the media is quoting her. So in understanding NRM itself, some of the guys making news may not understand how it operates. Because it's the chairman who has built the system and who's servicing the structure.
Is that true necessarily, Angelo?
Well, several questions were asked in that poll that
we'll
the newspaper selectively picked. I just wanted to correct the impression of what is being debated here. They were asked those who were party candidates, for instance, the answers you got were separated. All the people who were polled were registered voters. So when they were asked, did you vote? 88% said they did.
Right.
So their answers about their parties, are consistent with how they voted. Yes.
Right.
There's a certain level of accuracy there. Now, if you take Dr. Besigye and Yoweri Museveni, who are the two leading contenders, out of the picture, which is what the poll did, it opened up the field, and all these other names came out of the woodwork.
We'll be delving into those names in a bit.
The reason why I bring it up, Alan, is because Frank was talking about the impression created by the poll and not taking the entire poll into context.
Yeah.
Because, of course, the Monitor headline is, Museveni should retire in 2016. It's kind of actually misleading in a sense.
As usual.
Yeah. The question that was the question that was asked.
Don't mention those biases here.
The question that was asked was, like I said, if Besigye were not running, of course the answer is obvious. But then, when people were asked in either party whether or not Besigye or Museveni should run, there was a half-half answer. So people are not sure whether these two men should run against each other in the next election.
Betty, you hear parties being talked about. You represent UPC in Parliament. Your party is nowhere. What lessons can NRM and FDC learn from the non-existence of your party, so to speak? Because, to be honest, there was a time when UPC was the party. But right now, you seem to be the only UPC left standing.
But how can you say the party is non-existent when we are present in parliament? You can only say parties that are non-existent are non-registered parties.
No, but
so,
is there a difference between is UPC present and absent?
No, UPC is present because we are in parliament. We are solemnly represented and contributing to the national democratic process.
But with due respect,
in parliament,
with due respect,
we participated in election.
But with due respect, actually, the more important point for me, though, the more fundamental point is, what sorts of lessons would NRM and FDC learn from the fact that UPC was once an enigma in itself, and is now sort of been dissolved to one or two members of parliament.
Factually, you are not correct, because we are 10 members of parliament. So it means also in the country, people do not really have facts on their
I wasn't
plate.
talking. I wasn't
But,
talking as a figure of speech.
But to answer broadly your question is that, one, NRM as a party has deliberately, through its 24 years and 25 years of regime, put a clear policy on making sure that they kill the parties.
Come on, surely.
It started
UPC
with
is killing itself right now with
no.
internal rambles of
Let me start with no. By the way, there is no party without internal wrangles. That is why you hear people go to neck in NRM, and you will hear people butchering Mama Babazi.
They don't butcher, man, because if you butcher someone, he will.
No, I am now using political language
Yes.
because
Yeah.
there seems to be a question that because of what is happening in UPC, it is only UPC that has issues. All parties, even FDC has different. You have cliques in all the parties. When they went to neck in a State House, there were debates on issue of whether or not Amam Baba should remain Secretary General. So leave that alone. The fundamental is, are the conditions favorable for democratic, free and fair operation of political parties
And
in
let me bring
Uganda?
that question to you, Chris. Are the conditions favorable?
It is obvious, even the children in nursery school know that there are no conditions here for politics. What we are seeing is amateurs practicing governance. We see so many coming out.
Now, before he again engages in his amateur debate, I think there is one point that the research.
Look at this indiscipline demand. The question put to me.
No. When you say people in an amateurish manner,
Yes, I was asking him actually. He said UPC, NRM should learn from UPC.
Yes, but
they should actually learn when you're a political
but
party.
one fundamental
you
point.
build infrastructure that leave a legacy.
One fundamental point.
What as you say UPC is not there,
Yeah.
you can go to Bundibujo and see the presence of UPC. You can go to Atuturu Hospital and see the
But
presence.
how else is NRM
But,
winning
the
elections
presence
without
of
the presence of
NRM
this
But
place?
again, why do you
how,
contradict yourself?
is how many apartments Tumabes has got and what
Right.
kind of family
Now,
owns.
Obere does
Is
not
it the
surprise
difference? So
me.
learn from UPC,
Obere
but
does
when
not
in
surprise
power,
me.
build infrastructure.
Okay.
Now, the question you raise actually also raises many other questions that perhaps that research should have delved into answering. When you say, what should NRM learn from UPC? What should FDC learn from UPC? Now, you are looking at issues of like internal organization, internal democracy. Parties cannot aspire to lead a country and promote constitutional governance when internally they are not doing things right. Now, I would have expected this research, for example, if you say NRM is popular, good for me to hear as an NRM person, but tell Ugandans we are popular because of what?
And what makes you popular right now?
Of course we are popular.
Because of
we are
Robin.
popular.
Is it a momentary thing
No,
or is it
no,
sustainable?
because we had a manifesto that Ugandans voted for. People know what we
Ugandans
stand
don't
for.
read manifestos.
We explain to them. That's why we have campaign rallies. That's why our president had 215 rallies across the country.
And a lot of money.
What do you mean by a lot of money? I saw billboards everywhere of message of Museveni.
That
So if-
costs money.
that costs money. Democracy is not cheap, my Alan. But the point is, if we are to assess parties' performance, I think let's look at the internal structure, the internal democracy.
In its current structure, do you see a sustainable NRM party, Angelo?
Well,
I don't think he's the right person to answer that. I could
are.
answer it first.
No,
Yeah, let's hear from Angelo.
Okay.
I like the fact that Angelo is-
I can answer that question.
Yeah,
You know, because for obvious reasons, he sees NRM with rose-tinted glasses.
With partisan
Yeah.
interests.
But if you look at the internal pressures in the NRM that began after they went from being a movement organization to being a political party, you can see, you know, it speaks for itself. There is a record number of so-called independents that came out of that whole process of internal contradictions.
Yeah.
Every single party conference or internal conversation they have had has been an insurrection against the old guard. Largely what has been talked about here as an attempt to boot the Secretary General of their party. That is really an anti-incumbency feeling. By the way, I can give you other statistics. In the last election, more people voted in the NRM primaries than voted in the national election.
That's very interesting.
That's true. But also, there was a very high attrition rate you know, for NRM candidates at 68%.
That's for everybody.
The story
for
that is
68,
making
68%.
news this week.
But
can I make a reversal of
the
that?
point is, you know, if you're running a large-scale organization like that,
Yeah.
with these kinds of contradictions, ask yourself, you know, what sustainability means if the old guard were suddenly to be
But
retired.
that's a good question. You see, what the Angelo's
Briefly.
mistake
Yeah.
is internal contradictions to mean factions or rebellions. Any health organization, even if it's a business outfit, you will have disagreements, you will have even discontent, so long as at the end, I said it last week here, so long as at the end, the party coalesces on a common agenda and you don't see people defecting.
Okay, we're going to
And
continue
that's
discussing
what
this
you're forgetting in this
issue.
thing,
Let's
at-
continue in a
at the-
moment,
at the
Chris.
level-
Chris, let's hold on for a second. We come back with a deeper discussion on this matter. Obviously, the polls have come back. Do people agree with the polls? Do they believe in them? And what sorts of solutions should we be looking for in order to have a more cohesive country? You are on the fourth estate.
What you don't see.
We don't have structure.